If your own horrifying creations suddenly came to life and started trying to make you into one of them, what would you do? This woman thinks that she's finally made a career-saving breakthrough, but by the time that she realizes how bad things have gotten, it's already too late. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the attack of the meat puppets in stop motion. This struggling artist is about to give getting lost in your work a whole new meaning. Sitting at her work desk, this amateur stop-motion animator, Ella, is painstakingly helping her mother Suzanne get started on their latest project. The older woman is already an extremely successful artist, but after being hit with a severe case of arthritis, she's no longer able to work on the films herself. Instead, she relies on Ella to do the work for her, while relentlessly micromanaging her every move throughout the whole process. Every time that she reviews the footage, her mother isn't satisfied with the results, forcing them to start all over again. That night at dinner, Ella timidly suggests that they might be able to help Suzanne come up with some ideas, but her mother only scowls at her silently without saying a word. After a sleepless night, Ella goes down to the workshop the next morning and finds her mother there already waiting for her. She says that she wants to hear Ella's big idea, but the girl is just too nervous to explain, so the two of them press on and get back to work. Later, she goes to meet up with a group of friends at a local restaurant, including her boyfriend Tom and his sister Polly, who all act like it's their first time seeing her out of the house for quite a long time. She ends up spending the night at Tom's apartment, but wakes him up early in the morning to drive her home, saying that she needs to get back before her mother is out of bed. On the drive over, Tom asks her if she'd ever want to work on a project of her own someday, but Ella explains that she's never really felt like she has an artistic voice of her own. Okay, I think we can all see exactly where this is going. Ella's mother here hardly even lets her breathe without critiquing her in some passive-aggressive way, and even makes her spend every waking moment of her life working with these creepy-ass puppets that are the literal dictionary definition of nightmare fuel. That's enough to make anyone go ballistic. Right now, it seems like the biggest problem in Ella's life is the relationship with her mother. Basically, she treats poor Ella here like just another one of her puppets, and not like an actual human being with real feelings. Because they're constantly working on her mother's dream project, Ella has virtually no time left over for a social life of her own. It seems like she almost never gets a chance to see her friends, and even her boyfriend, the person who she'd logically spend the most time with besides her mom, acts like he hasn't seen her in months. The worst part is that even with all of this constant working, Ella here still doesn't feel like she has anything of her own to be proud of, and more or less openly acknowledges the fact that her entire life revolves around doing whatever her mother says. If Ella were to take these problems to a therapist, then they might say that her and her mother's relationship shows all of the signs of a concept known as enmeshment. Say it again with me, enmeshment. When this happens, the lack of any clear personal boundaries between family members causes the victim to have trouble developing their own individual identity without their parents' influence. This can lead to low self-esteem, severe anxiety and stress, and the feeling like you basically have no control over your own life. In order to get her life back on track, the first thing that Ella here needs to do is either find a way to fix her relationship with her mother, or go full no contact and just cut her off completely. It won't be easy at first, but it's probably the only way that this story is going to end without one or both of them leaving that house in a body bag. Instead of going home to start the cycle all over again, Ella should calmly explain to her mother that she needs to take a week off, and then go to stay at Tom's house or take a solo vacation somewhere to give herself some time to think everything through. Getting into an argument right now will only make the situation worse, so they need to take some time apart to let the tension simmer down. Then, they can both go to therapy either individually or together. She should also work up the courage to finally share her own ideas. Her mother might not like them, but she did actually ask to hear the idea when they got started the other morning. So at least that's a small step in the right direction. To look at things from her perspective for a minute, it's also extremely likely that Ella's mother is going through her own personal issues after being a well-respected artist all of her life, only to now lose control of her hands in her old age. That's still no excuse for treating Ella the way that she does, but getting these feelings out in the open is the only way that the two of them can finally learn to understand each other. You know, a good compromise would be for Ella here to agree to help her mother with the project 4 days out of the week, and start to develop a sense of her own self-worth. If all else fails, then she can always ditch the old and try to make her own project at Tom's place instead. But Ella here is going to wish that she had when we see how crazy this whole situation eventually gets. Ella quickly jumps into bed the moment that she gets home, but within seconds of putting her head down on the pillow, her mother is already on her ass, saying that it's time to get to work. Frustrated, Ella roughly slaps her mother's plate down on the table in front of her and leaves the woman to struggle with cutting the food for herself. As they take their places in the workshop, the woman comments that Ella seems out of it today, but she's saying it more as a way to ridicule her than out of any sense of concern. That's when she starts going full Gordon Ramsay on Hell's Kitchen, barking orders at her worse than she's ever done before. Just when it looks like she's about to burst a blood vessel, all of the power in the house suddenly goes out. As Ella switches on her flashlight, her mother suddenly lunges at her from out in the darkness before abruptly collapsing to the ground. At the hospital, the doctors tell Ella that her mother has had a stroke and gone into a coma. She'll have to stay in the hospital until further notice, so Ella decides to spend the night at her boyfriend's place for some comfort. Later that afternoon, while taking a bath at Tom's place, Ella has a strange vision of her mother's body lying on the living room floor. Although Tom says that she can stay there for as long as she wants, Ella insists that she needs to finish up her mother's project. Not wanting to go back to the old house, they decide to put her up in an empty apartment building that Tom knows about from work instead. This place looks old, unfinished, and honestly creepy as hell, so Tom is confused to learn that she's planning to spend her nights there too. But Ella says that she can't have any distractions if she's going to finish the film. While gathering up her equipment from out in the car, Ella has a strange encounter with a young girl who's coming the opposite direction down the stairs. The girl deliberately blocks Ella's path and stares her down until she's out of sight. Ella here tries getting back to work once everything's set up, but she can't seem to focus on anything with the girl constantly singing weird, ominous songs out in the hallway. Frustrated, she eventually goes to confront her, only to decide against it a minute later, but just as she's turning around, the girl comes running after her and shouts for her to hold on. Peeking through the doorway, the girl quickly notices Ella's workshop, which she explains is for making her stop-motion films. Curious, she asks if she can take a look, and after thinking it over, Ella reluctantly allows the girl to come inside, but that was her biggest mistake. Okay, here we go again. Why does it always have to be a creepy little girl? Now I know what you're thinking. Maybe she's just a normal kid, right? And my answer to that is just a thunderous hell to the no. I'm telling you right now that mother back there is not real. You can take your chances if you want, but I have a bad feeling that this girl is a threat. How can we be so sure? Well, let's take a look at the evidence. Right off the bat, Tom here clearly said that the building was empty because it's being gutted for renovations. Nobody is supposed to be in the building besides movers, and if a weird little girl really did live there with her family, then you'd think that he would have mentioned it so that Ella here wouldn't be taken by surprise. Speaking of a family, it's odd that we never seem to see any trace of the girl's parents. Tom had to leave Ella's apartment to go to work, which means that it's the middle of a weekday. So unless it's summer and school is closed, this kid should be in class, not wandering around abandoned buildings. The only other people who Ella has seen so far were those two movers on the steps, and they were even surprised to see her there. Just take a look at their expressions. These are not the faces of two people who expect expected to see another living soul. They looked at Ella like she was a ghost, and that's gotta make you at least question the random child, right? But it doesn't help that the building just straight up looks like a haunted house already. I don't like it one bit. If we rule out the obvious answer that she's just a strange little kid, then the way that I see it, this leaves us with one of two options. Either the kid is some kind of ghostly apparition, or she's a hallucination created by Ella's own subconscious mind. Either way, this is horrifying to say the least, but the good news is that dealing with ghost girls also happens to fall right within our area of expertise here at the How to Beat headquarters. If this is some kind of Casper action going on, then here's what Ella needs to do. First, we need to identify if a ghost is really what we're dealing with. Ella should start by watching closely for any telltale signs of paranormal activity. She also needs to listen carefully to what the girl says in order to see if she lets any evidence of her true nature slip through the cracks. And of course, ask Tom and the movers if they've ever seen the little girl who lives there. If they act like they don't know what you're talking about, that's how you know you're dealing with a spirit. Next up is performing a cleansing ritual with sage or holy water, or by rectifying prayers to purify the apartment. Usually these ghosts have a mystery that they want you to solve, like something that ties her to the physical realm and needs to be solved so that she can cross over to the other side. So I'd try searching the local news archives for any stories of girls who died in that building. Otherwise, it's time to bring in the professionals and let someone who's more qualified, like a priest or paranormal investigator, take over. If it's inner demons that we're dealing with, then that makes things a bit more complicated, but there still are definitely some possible solutions. When a person goes for extended periods of time without getting enough rest, we call that sleep deprivation. Getting a proper night's sleep is so important that even missing just a few hours during the week can lead to problems with basic actions, memory loss, and mood swings, but when it gets really bad, you might even experience full-blown visual and auditory hallucinations. When it comes to the causes of sleep deprivation, Ella here checks off just about every box in the book. A busy work schedule, irregular sleeping patterns, spending time in a strange environment like this creepy abandoned building, and more importantly, severe stress, anxiety, and depression, which were all brought on by Ella's troubled relationship with her mother, and the traumatic way that it all ended. The only good news here is that, unlike ghosts, there are scientifically proven solutions for getting better sleep. First of all, seek therapy, because she's clearly got some underlying issues that need to be worked out. Otherwise, the key here is to get herself on a consistent sleep schedule. Finally, maybe it would help for Ella to get a friend, you know, besides the puppets and the voices in her head. I'd suggest adopting a pet like a dog or a cat, because not only would this give her someone to keep her company and get her out of the house, to take them on walks and stuff, but animals always have a good sense for when the vibes are off, and could even help to warn her of any ghostly activity. Bottom line, Ella should have never invited that girl in, and she's going to regret that decision big time when she finds out what this little creep's real intentions are. Feeling bad for overreacting, Ella apologizes and says that she'll show the kid how her puppets work. She explains that the inside of each figure is an armature, which is the metal skeleton that gives the model its shape. By making tiny movements and capturing each frame as a still image before playing them back, she's able to give the figures the appearance of acting out a scene, as if they were really alive. Ella then shows the girl the project so far, but unfortunately, the girl is not impressed. When Ella asks how she would make it better, she suggests throwing the entire project out and making a new story that isn't as boring. The girl just so happens to have a story in mind. For her story, she says that there's a little girl lost in the woods, and she's scared because a terrifying monster is chasing her. Interested, Ella asks for more details, but the girl quickly changes the subject, turning her attention to a ball of wax in Ella's hands. She explains that it's mortician's wax, and the girl excitedly says that she should start making figures out of the wax instead. It's time for Ella to get back to work, so she sends the little girl back on her way, but after she's gone, Ella can't seem to get the girl's ideas out of her head. At some point in the night, Ella has a nightmare where she's standing in the forest from the girl's story, but when she wakes up, she finds that she's actually destroyed the old set and built an extremely detailed version of the woods instead, complete with a grossly realistic-looking girl crawling through the undergrowth. Tom is there too, and he's growing more and more frustrated with Ella constantly obsessing over her work, unable to take her eyes off of the computer screen. The next morning, Ella gets a visit from Tom's sister, Polly, who asks to have a look at her new project, and the woman is so impressed with what she sees that she decides to steal the idea for herself. As Ella walks Polly to the steps, she finds the little girl coming the other way. Excited, she brings her in to see the film so far, but the girl still doesn't think that the characters look real enough. Going to the kitchen, the girl grabs a piece of rotten steak from the garbage and insists that Ella should use it to give the figure a more lifelike feel. Ella hesitates at first, but when the girl says that she'll tell her the next part of the story if she does, she finally agrees to the idea. In the story, the girl runs through the woods until she finds an old abandoned house and hides inside. Ella asks who exactly the girl is hiding from, and she says that a terrifying ghoul called the Ashman is chasing after her, and that he comes for the girl over the course of 3 nights, but that's all she's willing to tell her for now. That night, while lying restlessly in bed, Ella hears 3 heavy knocks on her apartment door. Getting up to check, she finds the girl in the hallway outside wearing a bizarre Halloween mask, who says that she needs to show Ella something. Grabbing her by the hand, the girl leads Ella out of the nearby woods, where she's found the body of a dead fox that she wants her to use to keep enhancing the realism of the dolls. Disgusted, Ella draws the line at using an actual body for her project, saying that the girl is taking things a bit too far, but she says that she won't tell her any more of the story unless she does, and storms off, leaving Ella to figure it all out for herself. Okay, let me just stop you right there. Ella met this kid a day ago, and now she's already bringing us to see the animal corpse in the woods in the dead of night. Where the hell are this girl's parents anyway, that she's up late at night running around the woods like it's the Blair Witch Project, trying to get you to use dead animals for her weird rituals and stuff? I'll tell you where they are. They don't exist, because neither does this long-lost shining twin over here. You need more proof? Polly walked right past the girl without so much as acknowledging her existence. And we know Polly is a little self-absorbed, but that's pretty damn suspicious. Ever since this girl showed up, Ella's life has only gotten more and more bizarre. She smashed up her mother's props while in a dreamlike state, and then made a detailed model of the exact forest from the girl's story. And you mean to tell me that she did all of that and doesn't even remember it? When you start sleep building scenes of unimaginable horror, it's time to take a break from the grind before you end up grinding your way straight into Arkham Asylum. We're so out on this that it isn't even funny. I'm going to have to agree with Ella here. The last thing that we need to do is get involved with whatever this kid is up to. Instead, she should try coming up with some of her own ideas for once. She said that she wanted to help her mother with ideas, so she must have had something on her mind then. My advice? Get out of the house for a bit, take a walk, or read a good book, and that just might stimulate some creative thinking. Also, after everything that we've just seen, I think that it's time to stop working on this girl's story and pretty much cut their relationship off altogether. There's just one problem though. We can't just let her leave the story at, "There's someone coming." Now I need to know who, but there's no other way that I'm giving into her weird requests to find out. I'd try bribing the kid in some way to get her to keep telling me the story. Otherwise, I'm sleeping with the nightlight on and the baseball bat within arm's reach until further notice. Ella here needs to be careful because this little roadkill-obsessed freak is trouble, and it's only a matter of time before it all spirals out into pure insanity that no one is getting out of. Back at her apartment, Ella tries to come up with the next part of the story all on her own, but quickly finds that she's running into another creative block once again. Frustrated, she goes to visit her mother in the hospital, explaining that she tried to start her own film, but still feels like she doesn't have the talent to come up with meaningful ideas on her own. Later that same day, Ella goes to meet Tom and Polly at an apartment party somewhere across town. Desperate for new ideas, she decides to turn to the dark arts for the first time as a way to hopefully jumpstart the creative process. But this turns out to be one huge mistake. After a disturbing encounter in one of the rooms where a marionette on a projector screen tells her to search the party for inspiration, she goes out to watch the other people in the living room, and it's literally that meme where the guy is standing in the corner like they don't know that I'm a mentally disturbed stop-motion animator. There, Ella sees a man get a glass broken over his head, leaving a nasty cut. And while she's bizarrely playing with the loose flap of skin, she suddenly realizes that the little girl was right all along. Racing back to the woods, she finds the girl still there, crouched over the body of a dead fox, who says that the Ashman needs to be made out of something real. The two of them then wrap the body in a garbage bag and bring it back to the apartment, where Ella timidly begins cutting out pieces of its flesh and using them to add a disgusting level of realism to the Ashman. Switching it out in place of the older model, the girl then says that on the first night, the girl in the story tries to hide out in the house, but the Ashman ends up seeing her. Ella puts the figures in place and goes to take the first image, but every time that she tries to capture a frame, the buzzer for her apartment loudly rings as if someone is trying to get in. Ignoring it, Ella tries to keep working instead, but the buzzes only grow louder and more drawn out until finally she knows that she has to look. Suddenly, the little girl is gone, and when Ella picks up the phone to see who's buzzing her apartment, there's no one on the other end. Confused, she goes to look out her window, and down in the street below, she sees the slow-moving shadow of a figure, just like the one that was chasing the little girl through the woods in the story. For some inexplicable reason, Ella decides that it would be a good idea to go investigate further, and as she peers down the stairwell, she sees what could only be described as a real-life version of the Ashman slowly creeping its way up to her floor. Terrified, she rushes back to her apartment and slams the door shut, hiding like a child trapped in a nightmare. And when she nervously looks through the peephole, she sees a grotesque bloody eyeball staring right back at her, just like the little girl had said. Okay, well then, that was absolutely horrifying, and the worst part is that this is only the first night. Ella's biggest mistake was looking through the peephole. Never look through the peephole. Next time, she should have just said, "No one's home," in her most convincing voice. Ella here still has 2 more visits from the Ashman coming her way. There's good news and bad news with this, but the crazy part is that they're actually the same thing. Bad news is that we know he's coming back, but also the good news is that we know he's coming back. This gives us time to get prepared, and whether he's just a figment of her imagination or not, that doesn't mean that we can't fight back. It's time to talk about strategy. While we don't know much about the Ashman yet, what we do know for sure is that he's made of meat, which means that he can be damaged. If I were Ella, I'd be getting my hands on a weapon. An axe, a machete, a katana, maybe even a freaking flamethrower. Really just whatever she can find. Also, maybe it's time to circle back to the pet idea again, but this time it's not for companionship. Ella could adopt a bunch of hungry dogs, and then Mr. Meaty over here would be in for one hell of a welcome the next time that he showed up. The good news is that the thing has to climb up 8 flights of stairs before it gets to her apartment, so it might be a little winded when it gets there. Since the events in the film seem to be connected to what she experiences in real life, maybe we could use this to our advantage. She could try creating another figure that protects the girl from the Ashman, or even have her find a chainsaw in that house and take him out Evil Dead style. The only limit is her imagination, and there's never been a better time to finally get past that creative block. This right here is exactly why, if Ella needed inspiration, she should have gotten 8 hours of sleep. Anything to get her in a clear frame of mind. But now that we've got the Ashman knocking down her door, things are about to get so much worse. When Ella finally wakes up, she finds Tom already there standing over her. He tries to ask her what's wrong, but she's completely freaked out and can only explain that the man from her film saw her in real life. Reaching into her boot, she reveals that she never actually took what Polly gave her at all, and that everything that happened last night was all from within her own head. Moving the computer, Tom shows her that she'd actually animated the scene exactly how she said it happened to her the night before, suggesting that maybe it was all a bad dream. But Ella is not so sure. Terrified, the two of them decide to go back to Tom's apartment instead. The rest of the day goes as normal, with Ella trying to calm herself while she waits for Tom to get back from work. But later that night, she has another terrifying nightmare. This time, Ella wakes up frozen in place as the tiny wax figurine of the little girl enters through the cracked doorway and climbs up to the foot of her bed, reaching down to Ella's leg and pulling apart a slice of her skin. In the morning, the couple decide to go out for some breakfast, but just when Ella is starting to feel normal again, she notices the same little girl from the apartment sitting at a table behind them. Going to the bathroom to collect her thoughts, the little girl enters and tells her through the wall that on the second night, the Ash Man touches her. Tom decides to set her up with a job at his sister's advertising studio. But while there, Ella stumbles into a room where she finds Polly talking with her boss. And that's when she sees that she's basically made an exact copy of her project. Furious, Ella lashes out and starts tearing apart the set, completely destroying everything before storming out of the building. Back at her apartment, Ella gets back to working on the story while the little girl watches her from the couch. She reminds her that on the second night, the Ash Man is supposed to touch the girl, but Ella here decides that she wants to change the story. Instead, she insists that the girl from the story escapes without being grabbed, and the little girl on the couch only crosses her arms out of frustration, allowing Ella to try to change things if she wants to, but making it clear that it's not going to work. Ella starts shooting the next scene, but when the Ash Man pounds on the cabin door, her entire apartment starts to shake in real life, and the little girl on the couch mysteriously disappears. The lights begin to flicker off, and when Ella turns around, all of a sudden, a terrifying, life-sized version of the ghoul starts to rise out of the twigs used to make the model forest. Ella tries to run, but her legs suddenly fold like wax, and the next thing that she knows, she's been transformed into a tiny wax puppet herself, with the giant zombie still bearing down on her. Terrified, she quickly dips out through a tiny hole in the wall where the Ash Man is too big to follow, but he's still coming after her. With nowhere else left to go, Ella tries escaping through a second hole that leads into a strange, satin-lined room, but it's too late, and the Ash Man coughs up a slimy black egg, forcing Ella to swallow it whole. As she writhes on the floor in pain, she has another vision of the little girl standing over her, smugly reminding her that this is how the story goes. Okay, that was possibly some of the weirdest that I've ever been unfortunate enough to witness, and trust me, when you spend all day watching horror movies, you see some pretty weird So for this to even make me uncomfortable, damn. All that I can say is that I would not want to be in Ella's shoes right now. Well, I hope that this egg thing likes scalding hot coffee, because that's all I'd be drinking until it was dead. Seriously though, Ella here needs to do whatever she can to either kill that egg or get it the hell out of her body. At this point, we're well past the point of therapy. She needs to seek medical treatment immediately. The only option that leaves us with is the one that she should have taken a long time ago. Burn it all down. Take the set, the dolls, and even her camera equipment out to the parking lot and have a bonfire. After that, it's time to get the hell out of that apartment and turn her talents towards another career path, like making harmless pottery instead. Ella eventually wakes up in the hospital, where the nurses say that she was found wandering around the area outside of her building with an unexplained, painfully deep cut on her leg. Tom and Polly show up to visit her, and her boyfriend insists that she needs to take a break for a while, suggesting that maybe she can help work on his music videos instead once she's feeling better. Angry, Ella throws the offer right back in his face, basically calling him a wannabe musician with an office job. But he snaps back at her, saying that her films are just plain weird. Grabbing the keys, Tom says that he's going back to the apartment to destroy the project once and for all. But Ella finally caves, agreeing to go with him and do it together the next day. Later that afternoon, the nurses bring Ella to her mother's room and informs her that the woman is dead. As she stands over her mother's body, the little girl suddenly appears in the corner of the room, telling Ella that it's time to get back to work. The two of them sneak out of the hospital and make their way back to Ella's apartment, where the girl immediately starts setting up for the next part of the story. Just then, Ella calls her over and suddenly tries to take the girl out. But when it's over, the girl appears standing right behind her as if nothing had even happened. Mentally exhausted, Ella starts to break down on the couch, but the girl reassures her that they're almost done with the film, promising that in the end it will all be worth the struggle. She mentions that true artists always put a piece of themselves into their work, And now she wants Ella to do just that, with an audience of all of her old puppets gathering around on the couch to watch. Ella unwraps the bandages on her leg and begins doing what the little girl says. But just then, she hears the unmistakable sound of a key as Tom and Polly suddenly appear in the doorway. Ella growls at them to get out, but the two of them rush inside and start bandaging up her wounds as she begins to slip in and out of consciousness. While they're carrying her out to the car in the hopes of getting her back to the hospital, Ella suddenly kicks Polly straight in the face, and then violently shoves Tom down a flight of stairs. Terrified, Polly tries to run, but Ella tackles her and repeatedly strikes her with the camera. Oh, it's brutal, but Ella is not done yet. She goes where Tom is lying injured and suffocates him with her bare hands, killing them both without anyone around to witness what she's just done. Okay, well, I guess we all knew it was coming. It looks like Ella here finally snapped, and honestly, I'm surprised that it took this long. But now that we've crossed the point of no return, there's only one thing left to say. Sing along if you know the words. Ella, you f***ed up! Since this whole thing started, you, your mom, and your creepy little friend were the only ones who couldn't see as plain as day that you needed a vacation ASAP. And the craziest thing is that you're just getting started. I'm telling you, at this point, this woman is so unhinged that the hinges have completely stopped hinging and can never be rehinged. Now, the best case scenario is that you'll spend the rest of your life behind bars, which honestly might be what you really need. But what's about to happen instead is a fate that's even worse than anything that she could ever imagine. I'm sorry, Ella, but you f***ed up! With the little girl leading the way, Ella drags both of the bodies back to her apartment and decides to use them to make two more life-sized figures of the characters from her story. Now it's time to find out how the story ends. And after getting the figures in their positions, Ella staggers backwards as the puppets begin moving by themselves. While Ella watches, the Ash Man slowly marches towards the girl puppet. But just as he reaches her, the creature turns to look at Ella and starts coming after her instead. Panicking, the little girl says that this isn't what was supposed to happen, and Ella retreats into a closet on the other side of the room. But the Ash Man quickly follows her inside until he's standing just inches away from her in the total darkness. All of a sudden, Ella's face turns to wax, and she offers some to the Ash Man, who starts with the lump in her hands before leaning in to begin slowly devouring Ella's head. Sometime later, Ella finds herself lost in the very same woods from the story until she comes to the house where the little girl is waiting. She's sitting at a laptop, and on the screen, Ella sees herself dead on the apartment floor. The only other thing in the room is a large box, lined inside with the same yellow satin that she saw when the Ash Man touched her. And now that the story's over, Ella silently climbs inside and shuts the lid. It looks like her masterpiece is finally complete, but it came at an absolute horrific price. And in the end, I think we can all learn a valuable lesson. Sometimes, it might be better just to have a boring office job after all. But what would you do? I'm sorry, but first things first is I ain't talking to no scary little kids in an abandoned building. But that's just me. Let us know down in the comments what you would have done. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'll see you guys in the next video, and have a damn good day.